Hello and welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. Well, President Biden maybe thought he was saving the world by giving in and writing the resignation letter to the great people of this land when Nancy Pelosi and other establishment Democrats threatened him with the 25th Amendment. And he had no choice but to sign on the non-dotted line. Maybe it wasn't even his signature, but last night he addressed the nation. And I was looking for, I resigned, and here's why. I didn't really get it. He looked very orange and kind of rested. He struggled to keep his eyes wide open, and he struggled with his words. There was a lot of democracy. So basically what he said was, I had the most successful administration of any president in the 20th or 21st centuries. I'm amazing. The economy's great. The world loves us because of me. I save the world. I should host a podcast called Joe Biden Saves the World. Maybe I will with the extra time I'm going to have in a few short months. And the reason that I'm not running anymore is because I want to pass the torch. Maybe it's like the Olympic torch to a new generation of people. So you might stop and say, well, why? If you're saying that your accomplishments and your merit is good enough reason for you to run for a second term, you're not really giving us the why. Then why aren't you running? Is something wrong? Is he sick? Is he not feeling well? Does he no longer have the energy? If he is sick, how long has he been sick? But he didn't address any of that and, really didn't talk about the vice president to whom he's handing the reins very undemocratically. So, it's very interesting and ironic and rich that the argument is, in order to save democracy, I am going to insert someone into the presidency, hopefully, who is now the presumptive nominee for the Democrat Party, without anyone in the country having given her a single vote. 14 million people voted for Joe Biden. 0 people have voted for Kamala Harris as president. Yet somehow all of the delegates and superdelegates and the establishment faithful have gotten in line behind her. And we still don't know exactly why Joe Biden resigned at the end of the week when the Republican National Convention was held. We just know that he's gone, but still kind of here. He has promised to fulfill his duties as president for the next 6 months. And we will really hope for the best as a country, although these are terrifying times. Now, it's interesting because who hasn't endorsed Vice President Harris at this point? The progressives, and one of the most interesting yet forceful voices demanding that Joe Biden stay in the race and stand up to the bullies who were trying to remove him from the ticket was AOC and presumably the rest of the squad. And what she said, it was quite telling. She said, I'm in the room with these people when they are having these conversations. So she's basically saying, I have access to power and I know what they're saying. I get to glimpse behind the curtain. And what she was saying is they're not just unhappy with Joe Biden, they're unhappy with the entire ticket. So before, when he dropped out and later in the day last Sunday endorsed Kamala Harris, what she was saying was, don't let go of Joe Biden because no one wants Kamala Harris either. And that was the going wisdom among Democrats and politicos and people who were just watching this kind of stuff for sport. But she really was foisted upon us in the most undemocratic way possible with no explanation.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
So last night was a wonderful opportunity for the president to put a bow on his administration and give us the feels and a sense of sentimentality for his life and service and for, an administration well executed. But we didn't get that. And now what we're left with, the people, and I talked about this on Tuesday, the people who were propping up Joe Biden as some sort of healthy, youthful, spry Olympic sprinter, now they're trying to paint Kamala Harris with a very false brush, that she is an able prosecutor, that she's cool and young and hip and on the right side of every issue when we know the exact opposite is true. And so I still want voters to be skeptical of that, especially since her first big stop today was speaking in front of the American Federation for Teachers. And that is the second largest teachers union that is helmed by Randy Weingarten, who is an awful person. And she is one of the main bureaucratic enemies of freedom in this country, especially if you are a parent who's looking for the freedom to choose a better school for your child. And if you live in an educational desert, as there are also food deserts, and you know that those choices are withheld from you by powerful teachers' unions, she despises choice, which means she despises families and children who would be better served if they were in a different learning environment. So that is who Kamala Harris is praising today with her handout for big donations from the teachers union that got $200 billion during the pandemic to keep schools closed, to keep teachers out of schools, hence kids out of schools. So they were stuck at home and sometimes parentless apartments where, if their parents were lucky enough to have employment, they were working in grocery stores and restaurants, the few places that were actually open, while their kids withered in loneliness and silence, developing mental illnesses there still aren't enough money and resources for, even though all of that money exists. So that's who Kamala Harris is aligning herself with. The very person who made sure that your kids wouldn't get into school, especially if they were in big cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York City. So while they're still suffering and feeling the effects, she is trying to pretend like the teachers union is the best thing that's ever happened to education when it really is the absolute worst. So when this presidential candidate shows you who she really is, you better believe her, because at least she is giving you answers that betray her true political philosophy, which is actually statist and quite dangerous, unlike the predecessor, President Biden, who is giving you no explanation at all. He may have been the victim of a coup, and he doesn't have enough wherewithal to blink his eyes in Morse code SOS, because he obviously needs the help. This has been Kennedy Saves the World. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app. Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.